This is Max and Mia podcast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Max and Mia podcast. Good to have you with us. I'm Max.
And I'm Mia. Now, before we jump in, how are you doing? And we're actually asking, how's your day been so far?
Whether you're on your way to work, taking a walk, or just sitting down with a coffee, we hope things are going well on your end.
All right, now that we've checked in, let's talk about today's episode because we have a really good one for you.
As always, this is not just about training your ear. You'll also be picking up plenty of new vocabulary along the way.
So let's not waste any more time. Here we go.
All right, first topic of the day. Does reported speech ring a bell?
It might. But even if it does, stick with us. Because there's a good chance you're making at least one mistake with it without even realizing it.
So, what is reported speech? Basically, it's the way we talk about what someone else said. Instead of repeating their exact words, we report them. For example, if your friend says, "I'm tired," and later you tell someone else about it, you'd say, "He said he was tired." That's reported speech.
And notice something right there. The verb changed. I am became he was. That shift in tense is one of the key things about reported speech. When you move from direct speech to reported speech, the verbs typically go back one tense in the past.
Exactly. Present simple becomes past simple. Past simple becomes past perfect. And so on. The tense shifts back, almost like taking one step into the past.
Now, there's another small detail worth mentioning, the word that. You've probably seen sentences like, "She said that she was coming." That little word connects the reporting verb to the rest of the sentence. But here's the thing. In informal conversation, people drop it all the time. She said she was coming. Both are correct.
In more formal writing or speech, though, keeping that is usually the safer choice. It makes the sentence feel more complete and structured.
Good point. Now let's get into something that trips up a lot of intermediate learners. And honestly, it's one of the most common mistakes we hear. The difference between say and tell.
Both mean to communicate something verbally, but they work differently when reporting speech. With say, you don't need to mention who you said it to. You just say what was said. For example, he said he was tired. Clean, simple, no problem.
But if you try to say, he said me he was tired, that's where it breaks down. That structure doesn't work in English. Say doesn't take a person directly after it.
Tell, on the other hand, always needs a person. You have to mention who received the information. He told me he was tired. She told us the meeting was canceled. You can't just say, he told that he was tired, and leave it there. The person has to be there.
So to sum it up, say, no person needed. Tell, person required. It's a small difference, but it matters every single time you use it.
And once you get that into your head, it sticks. Trust us.
All right. Now that we've covered the basics, it's time to see all of this in action. Coming up, we have our first conversation of the day, where you'll hear reported speech used naturally, the way people actually talk. Pay close attention, because we'll be coming back to it.
Oh, finally. I was starting to think you'd completely quit on us.
Not a chance. It's just been one of those stretches where everything piles up at once. Work, family stuff, you name it. But I cleared my Saturday, and here I am. So catch me up. What did I miss?
Quite a bit, actually. Tom came by last weekend and he said the whole tomato section needs to be redone before spring arrives. Apparently the soil isn't draining the way it should after all the rain we had in February.
He said that? I genuinely thought we'd fix that issue back in October. We spent the whole afternoon turning that bed over.
I know, I was surprised too, but he told me the problem had come back worse than before. He left a full list of instructions on the notice board and said we'd need to bring in fresh compost and work it in properly before putting anything new in the ground. He seemed pretty firm about it.
All right, that's going to take some time. Did he at least say when he needed it finished by?
He said he wanted it sorted before the end of the month, which feels tight when you actually look at how much space we're talking about.
No kidding. Okay, and what's happening with the herb section? Sandra told me she had plans to extend it along the east wall. Did that ever happen?
She started it, yes, got about halfway through before she told us she'd be away for 3 weeks, something about visiting her sister up north. So she left some notes and asked if anyone could keep things going in her absence.
And someone took that on?
Patrick volunteered, which, I mean, good on him for stepping up, but he told me the other day that he figured rosemary and mint would do just fine growing together in the same container. So...
Oh no, that's not going to end well.
I told him it probably wasn't the best idea and that they tend to compete for space and water. He listened, at least. I think he just didn't know. I'll keep checking on that corner when I'm here.
I can swing by that side too. What else is going on? You mentioned something about the coordinator when we were texting.
Right, yes. She sent an email midweek and said the garden might be getting some press coverage next month. A journalist apparently reached out and told her they were putting together a piece on community-led projects around the city. She told us to keep it tidy and make sure everything looks its best, just in case they come to take photos.
That's actually really exciting. This place deserves a bit of recognition.
It really does. All right, enough standing around. We've got a lot of work to do and the morning isn't getting any longer.
Tomatoes first, I'm guessing.
Obviously. Grab that shovel and let's get moving.
All right, let's take a quick look at that conversation. Did you catch all the reported speech in there? Because there was quite a lot of it.
There really was, and it felt completely natural, which is exactly the point. Monica and Michael weren't sitting in a classroom. They were just catching up, passing along information from other people. And that's precisely when reported speech shows up in real life.
A couple of moments worth highlighting. When Monica said he told me the problem had come back worse than before, notice that she used told followed immediately by me. There's the person right there. You can't skip it with tell.
And contrast that with, he said we'd need to bring in fresh compost. No person after said. Just straight into what was communicated. That's the difference we talked about, playing out exactly as it should.
Also worth noticing, that was dropped almost every single time. He said he wanted it sorted. She told us she'd be away. Totally informal, totally natural. That's how people actually speak.
Good stuff. Keep those patterns in mind, because the more you notice them in real conversations, the faster they'll become second nature for you too.
All right, moving on to our second topic of the day. And this one is something that comes up constantly in English. Modal verbs of deduction. Specifically, must, might, and can't.
Now, you've probably seen these words before in other contexts. Must for obligation, can't for impossibility, might for possibility. But today, we're looking at something slightly different, using them to make deductions. In other words, to express how certain you are about something based on what you know or observe.
Think of it as a scale of certainty. At one end, you're almost completely sure something is true. At the other end, you're almost completely sure it isn't. And somewhere in the middle, you're just not certain either way.
Let's start with must. When you use must to make a deduction, you're saying you're highly confident something is true, based on the evidence in front of you. For example, She's been working since 6 in the morning. She must be exhausted. You're not stating a fact. You're drawing a logical conclusion.
Then there's can't, which sits at the opposite end. You use it when you're highly confident something is impossible or untrue. He just had lunch 20 minutes ago. He can't be hungry already. Again, not a fact, but a strong logical conclusion going in the opposite direction.
And in the middle, we have might. This one expresses genuine uncertainty. You think something is possible, but you're not committing to it. She's not answering her phone. She might be in a meeting, or she might just have it on silent. You simply don't know.
Now, what about the past? Because deductions don't only happen in the present. Sometimes you're looking back at something and trying to figure out what happened. This is where it gets a little more interesting structurally.
For past deductions, you use the modal verb followed by have and then the past participle. So the structure becomes must have, might have, or can't have, followed by the past participle of the main verb.
For example, I called him 3 times and he never picked up. He must have been asleep. You're making a confident deduction about something that already happened.
Or she looked completely lost when the teacher asked the question. She can't have studied for the exam. Strong deduction but pointing to the past.
And with might have, the lights were off when I walked past. They might have already left. Possible, but uncertain.
The key thing to remember is that these aren't facts. You're not saying what definitely happened or what definitely is. You're reasoning out loud using the information available to you. That's what makes this structure so useful in everyday conversation.
And you'll hear it all the time once you start paying attention. People make deductions constantly without even thinking about the grammar behind it.
Which brings us perfectly to our second conversation of the day. You're about to hear these modal verbs used the way they actually sound in a real exchange between two people. Listen carefully to how the speakers express certainty, doubt, and everything in between.
Has Daniel come in yet? His desk is empty and it's already 9:15.
I haven't seen him. His coat isn't on the rack either, which is strange. He must be running late. That almost never happens with him.
I know. And he didn't reply to the message I sent him on Friday about the Henderson project. I followed up twice and nothing. That's really not like him.
He can't have missed it. He reads everything, usually within minutes of receiving it. Something must be going on.
That's what I'm thinking. He might have had some kind of emergency at home. He mentioned a while back that his dad hadn't been in great shape. I don't know the details, but it sounded like it had been going on for a few months.
Oh, I didn't know that. He never really talks about personal stuff at work. He must have been carrying that quietly for a while if none of us picked up on it.
Yeah, that's just how he is. I just hope everything's okay. Did he say anything to you last week, even in passing?
On Thursday, he said he was feeling a bit off, but I figured he just meant tired. He can't have been seriously unwell, though, because he's stayed until nearly 7 that evening finishing the Mercer drawings. You don't push through like that when you're genuinely struggling.
True. Maybe it just caught up with him over the weekend. Or he might simply be stuck in traffic. Apparently, there was an accident on the bypass this morning. Someone mentioned it in the lift on the way up.
That might be all it is, though it must be incredibly frustrating for him if that's the case. You know how much he hates being late. He genuinely takes it personally, like it reflects on him somehow.
He really does. Do you remember that time the train was delayed by 20 minutes? He rang the office twice before he even arrived, just to make sure everyone knew he was on his way.
Yes, he must have apologized about 15 times that morning. People had completely forgotten about it by 11, and he was still bringing it up at lunch.
Classic Daniel. Right, I'll drop him a quick message. Nothing that puts any pressure on him, just something casual so he knows we noticed and that there's no stress on our end.
Good idea. And if he's still not in by 10, one of us should loop Claire in before the stand-up. She'll want to know so she's not caught off guard in front of the whole team.
Exactly. She's good about that kind of thing, but she hates being the last to find out. All right, I should get back to my desk. I've got a pile of client emails from Friday that I've been very successfully pretending don't exist.
They must have built up quite a bit by now then.
Oh, without a doubt. All right, let's get this week started.
Good conversation. And a very relatable one, I think. Most of us have been in that situation, wondering what's going on with someone who's out of character.
Exactly. And that's what made it such a natural fit for this topic. The whole conversation was built around not knowing. Tomas and Sasha had no facts, just observations. And so every conclusion they reached came through a modal verb.
Right from the start, he must be running late. Strong deduction, present. Then, almost immediately, he can't have missed it. Strong deduction, past. Both in the first minute of the conversation.
And might carried all the uncertainty. He might have had an emergency. He might just be stuck in traffic. Neither of them knew, and might captured that perfectly without overstating it.
The structure in the past is worth repeating one more time. Modal plus have plus past participle. Must have been, can't have missed, might have had. Once that clicks, you'll start hearing it everywhere.
Keep that in your back pocket. All right, let's move on.
Last topic of the day, and honestly, one of the most practical ones we've covered in a while. Vocabulary for debating. Phrases you can use to agree, disagree, and hold your ground in English, whether that's in a meeting, a discussion, or just a conversation that gets a little heated.
And the reason this matters isn't just vocabulary. It's also about culture. In English-speaking contexts, especially in the UK and the US, there's a strong tendency to soften disagreement before delivering it. You rarely hear someone just say, "You're wrong," and leave it at that. There's almost always a buffer first.
So let's start with agreement, because sometimes you genuinely are on the same page as someone and you want to make that clear. A couple of strong ones. I couldn't agree more. It's a classic, it's natural, and it lands well in almost any context. And you hit the nail on the head, which is an idiom meaning the other person got it exactly right. That one sounds very natural and native.
Then there's the middle ground, polite disagreement. This is probably the most important category for intermediate learners, because it's where most real conversations actually live. "I see your point, but" is a great opener. You're acknowledging the other person before pushing back, which immediately takes the edge off. Same with, "I'm not so sure about that." It sounds mild, but it's actually a firm no. And "with all due respect" is the classic setup before you dismantle someone's argument.
Now, if the situation calls for something more direct, maybe the debate is more intense or you know the person well, you can step it up. "I completely disagree" leaves no room for ambiguity. "I don't share your view on this" is slightly more formal, but equally clear. And "that doesn't make any sense to me" is more blunt, best saved for when you're comfortable with the person or the stakes are high.
And finally, for those moments when you want to plant your flag before the discussion even begins, "I firmly believe that" sets up a strong position. As far as I'm concerned, signals that what follows is your personal stance and you're owning it fully.
What ties all of these together is that they give you control over the tone of a conversation. Knowing when to soften and when to stand firm is just as important as the words themselves.
Which brings us to our final conversation of the day, where you'll hear these phrases come up naturally between two people with very different opinions. Pay attention not just to what they say, but to how they say it.
I was reading earlier that more companies are pushing for a full return to the office. And honestly, I think it makes sense. People work differently when they're physically around each other.
I'm not so sure about that. I've been fully remote for nearly 2 years now, and I'm more focused than I ever was sitting in an open-plan office with 40 people around me.
I see your point, but productivity isn't the whole story, is it? There's the culture side of things, the spontaneous conversations, the energy of a shared space. You just can't replicate that on a screen.
I don't share your view on this at all, to be honest. Those spontaneous conversations mostly happen between the same 5 people who already get on well. Everyone else puts their headphones on and gets on with it. As far as I'm concerned, the office was never really about the work. It was about being seen doing the work.
That doesn't make any sense to me. You're describing bad office culture, not offices in general. When it works properly, being in the same room as the people you collaborate with genuinely changes how you communicate and how quickly things move.
With all due respect, I think you're describing the exception rather than the rule. Most people I know who've gone back full-time are more drained, not more engaged.
Fair point on the energy side. I won't argue with that. But I firmly believe that people who are new to a job or early in their career genuinely lose out when everything is remote. The informal learning, the overhearing how a senior colleague handles a difficult conversation, you simply cannot get that from a message thread.
You hit the nail on the head there, actually. That's the one area where I think being in person really does matter. Someone who's just starting out, new to a team, still figuring things out. I'll give you that completely.
So we both land on hybrid then?
Hybrid, yes. 2 or 3 days with some flexibility over which ones. I couldn't agree more on that version. What I completely disagree with is forcing everyone back 5 days a week simply because leadership feels better walking past the full floor of desks.
On that specific point, there's no doubt in my mind you're right. That's not a strategy, that's just optics.
Finally, solid ground.
Only took us the entire first course to get here.
Worth it. Right, dessert. Are we debating that too, or have we used up our arguing energy?
I firmly believe we're getting the tiramisu and not discussing it further.
No argument for me there.
And that's a good example of how these phrases work in a real back and forth. Neither of them was rude about it, but neither was vague either. They pushed back, held their ground, and still found a place where they actually agreed.
The fact that the conversation moved from "I completely disagree" all the way to "I couldn't agree more" within the same exchange is worth sitting with. These phrases aren't fixed positions. They move with the conversation, and knowing how to use them gives you real control over the tone.
And that's a wrap on today's episode. 3 topics, 3 conversations, and a good amount of language you can start using straight away.
If you found this useful, the best thing you can do is subscribe so you don't miss the next one. It takes 2 seconds, and it genuinely helps us reach more people who are on the same journey as you.
And if you enjoyed it, a like goes a long way. It really does make a difference for us.
We'll be back soon with another episode. Until then, keep listening, keep practicing, and remember that every conversation in English, however small, is a step forward.
Take care, everyone.
See you next time.